Steve?
The sanctions that we've seen so far have been fairly targeted against Russia. Would you describe the sweeping nature of what you're talking about later this week being coordinated between Europe and the United States?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of where the Europeans are, where we are, and I think we'll see that in the days to come. But what we know is this: the Europeans made clear last week that they were prepared to act in key sectors of the Russian economy, including the financial sector, the arms sector, the energy sector. And so I think you can anticipate actions in those areas. Similarly, they're looking to broaden the criteria by which they can sanction people or entities. And I think one of the things they're looking at is to bring in some of the cronies of President Putin. So we've already seen with the sanctions to date, as I went through a few moments ago, a very serious impact on the Russian economy. And indeed, it's the sanctions themselves and then the climate of tremendous uncertainty they create, even with the prospect of more sanctions, that has led to a capital flight, investment drying up, and the growth projections going down to basically zero.
And when you talk about this force that's building up, the Russians are building up, are they preparing a Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Look, one of the things that we believe Russia's been trying to do is, for example, to get the Ukrainians to take some action that they can then use as justification, quote unquote, for some kind of intervention, a so-called humanitarian intervention or so-called peacekeeping intervention. So that's one of the things that we think is in the potential Russian playbook. The other thing that they're doing, most significantly, is increasing the supply of heavy equipment, weapons, and fighters to the separatists across the border. And this is well documented in what we've seen. It's well documented in social media.
In talking about that buildup and the heavier artillery, are we talking about more surface-to-air missile capability?
We are talking about multi-rocket launchers. That's one of the things we're seeing. Artillery pieces, tanks, armored vehicles, and a concern, as I said at the outset, about increasingly heavy weaponry. And I think there's a reason for this. And the reason is that on the battlefield itself, the Ukrainians are doing very well against the separatists and trying to regain the sovereignty of their entire country. So Russia's proxies are right now on the losing end of the fight, and that's why we think Russia is doubling down.
Do you think there are still Buk missile launchers within Ukraine at this point?
We believe that there are SA-11s that are still within Ukraine, including potentially in separatist hands.
Roger. Thanks. Two-parter. How did you arrive at the $37 billion spent to defend the ruble? And second, are there any other security things you're looking at besides rocket launchers and tanks and heavy equipment?
So I think the $37 billion has actually been fairly well documented in the financial press and by other statements that have been made, but we can get you the backup for that. And in terms of the military equipment that the Russians are providing, is that what? There again, those are the main elements, but there are certainly other things that are going in. But in terms of heavy weaponry, those are the critical elements. April.
As you're talking about actions that could be taken this week by the EU and the U.S., I want to go back to something that Josh said from the podium Friday about Russia and Putin were culpable with the downing of Flight 17. Is there a chance, and is there a possibility, that Putin could be charged in the International Crimes Court with war crimes by any chance with all of this that's going on right now?
Look, when it comes to Russian culpability, I think the record is clear. The Russians have been directly supporting the separatists with the provision of weapons. We believe that the SA-11 that was used to shoot down the Malaysian airliner came from Russia. We don't know who was operating it, but we believe the weapon itself came from Russia. The three top leading separatist leaders are all Russian nationals. So it's clear that Russia has a significant influence over the separatists and could, if it so desired, get them to cease and desist. So in that sense, there is a clear and ongoing culpability by Russia for events in eastern Ukraine and for a failure to de-escalate the situation, and indeed for the context in which all of this has happened, including the shoot-down of the airliner. In terms of pointing to exactly who pulled the trigger, that we don't know yet, and we'll see if we can develop that information. But the bottom line is this: through its ongoing support and increasing support for the separatists, Russia bears responsibility for everything that's going on in eastern Ukraine.
So you're saying technically he could be brought before the International Crimes Court?
Look, I don't want to get ahead of anything. Again, the main point is to emphasize that Russia bears responsibility and has the ability to actually de-escalate this crisis by moving it onto a diplomatic track. That is what we most would like to see.
Nadia.